I am the bird who hunts in the night. Crime will fall beneath me. Injustice shall be crushed.
Then I'll strike first.
How Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, if you've never seen this before, I am about to show you something that may change your entire concept of how to play Elden Ring. This build is genuinely one of my favorite playstyles I've experimented with in the 2 months since release, and I have played around with a fair few now. But in both PvE and PvP, nothing has been so just purely satisfying for me as this. It isn't a build where you hit one skill button and the thing in front of you dies, but it is still pretty damn good regardless of that. Worth mentioning that Morgott there was New Game Plus Morgott, as is most of the things that you will see in the footage here today. This weapon skill is called Raptor of the Mists. You may have seen it, you may have messed with it yourself, but in this build we are going to be building around it entirely and trying to incorporate it as a main staple of our gameplay into being parry jump attacks, because when you hit this button, you crouch down low, and if during this animation you are hit by an enemy attack, you dodge it by teleporting into the air, ready to do a plunge attack, which you can get a lot of good out of if you plan around it right. Also, just a little bonus note, if you happen to use the Rupturing Crystal tier in your Wondrous Flask, and then also use Raptor of the Mist at the right time, you can do the explosion, which will do the damage to you, but will trigger Raptor of the Mist doing a jump attack, so you can do the explosion without staggering yourself and also get a plunge attack. It's not the most effective way to use it, but it's really cool though. It's worth saying at this point, this build in PvE would be purely stronger if you took the exact same concepts that I'm showing you here and instead applied them to two giant Crusher's hammers with the offhand using Royal Knight's Resolves, sort of like our previous jump attack build that we've done on the channel, but both for the sake of variety and for the sake of exploring new styles of gameplay, we've gone with power stancing whips for their unique jump attacks and absolutely exceptional melee range. Particularly, this is great in PvP, especially, as personally I believe whips are an extremely underrated weapon in PvP. You can absolutely control people's movement depending on how you play it with the range that they have. But most importantly, the fatal flaw that they generally have, that Raptor of the Mist normally has in PvP, is that your opponent is able to react to you jumping into the air, and then dodge the follow-up attack. But what if there was a way to prevent that, or at the very least make it extremely hard to pull off in comparison? There is this little incantation I'm personally a fan of called Dragonbolt Blessing. This incantation makes any one-handed uncharged weapon hits bounce off of you except for specifically whips or great colossal weapon heavy attacks. The result is anytime that you go against someone using a medium or small weapon or even a big weapon that isn't using strong attacks or two-handing it, they will bounce when they hit you. If you hit Raptor of the Mist, and they bounce, they will still bounce, and you go into the air without taking any damage or being staggered, and then you can hit with the plunge attack button. A combo so simple in theory, once the buff is applied, and in practice, it works so frickin' well too. I absolutely loved messing around with this in duels, quite possibly the most fun that I've had in duels in Elden Ring so far. It's just a really unique playstyle to have the range that the whips have for your regular hits, but then the immediate counter punish for whenever someone pushes too close to you and attacks. It's like a match made within the Air Tree itself. In PvE, the majority of non-fodder enemies don't really care about Dragonbolt Blessing though, unfortunately. Like, technically, I guess if a giant is wielding a short sword proportionally to him, it is still a colossal sword in comparison to you, so fair enough, really. But in PvP is where this works absolute wonders. The main thing about it as well is it is in the category of a body buff, meaning it notably does not stack with things like Flame Grant Me Strength, a staple buff in the game that that raises your physical and fire damage by 20% for 30 seconds. However, the result of this is in PvE, on any fight that you know you can't make the enemy's weapon bounce anyways, you just use Flame Grant Me Strength instead. Bam, problem solved. The build works in every situation. And I mean it. It may use bleed as a major source of damage, but even when it is hitting something bleed immune, it can still get the job done, even if a touch slower. So, what are all the pieces that properly make this tick then? Well, the weapons themselves are the Hoslow Pedal Whips, which you can actually get 2 of in the same playthrough now, making it easy to power stance them. They are gorgeous, and they are quite good for the purpose of applying bleed, especially when you change their affinity to occult and spec yourself in the arcane attribute like we are here. We could go for bleed for even more bleed buildup, but I find this spread to be way more reliable as a general source of damage, as realistically, while bleed is great, the main reason that we want bleeds to happen is to trigger our White Mask and Bloodlord's Exaltation Talisman, which both boost your damage in general when you trigger a blood loss for 10% and 20% bonus each for a 20-second duration after the fact. These whips apply bleed quite quick in this setup, and so this is really great to have. As well, of course, as we are using Raptor of the Mist as our main weapon skill, we have to make the most out of our jump attacks too, which we can do with the Claw Talisman, which boosts jump attack damage by 15%, as well as the Raptor's Black Feathers chest armor piece to boost jump attack damage by another 10%. As the weapons themselves are incredibly light, feel free to use your other 2 armor slots to fill up your equip load with damage resistance, or just whatever fashion you wish to try and complete the look. The other 2 talisman slots are mostly free, as sadly the Shard of Alexander doesn't affect the damage of the attack after Raptor of the Mist, because technically Raptor of the Mist is the teleport itself and does not include the attack that you have the option to follow it with. As a result, we get to use arguably the 2 best general utility talismans in the game. Erdtree's Favor +2, which gives you a bunch of extra HP, stamina, and equip load, which is all useful stuff, and then also the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, which heavily raises your physical damage negation. As a result, this build is actually incredibly tanky as well, especially compared to any build that uses a talisman that lowers their damage negation to increase their damage. As we mentioned earlier, we use Dragonbolt Blessing, which has a 21 faith requirement, but that means it's free to just pick up Flame Grant Me Strength and use it the way that we already talked about. And then only 4 more points after that to reach Golden Vow 2, which is incredibly worth 4 levels as a 15% damage boost and 10% damage negation boost for 80 seconds after casting. The result of all of this is a build that has very high damage negation of all kinds, great damage on jump attacks, a way to trigger a jump attack by essentially fully negating the incoming hit, which, if they are one-handing a later weapon, also slightly staggers them. Upon landing your hit, if it's in PvP, a double hit plunge attack with a setup will most often trigger a bleed. In PvE, it may take a couple more, but the same principle applies. Your damage increases on every attack that follows the bleed now, which means even if you spam out little piddly quick whip slaps afterwards, they'll do decent damage from significant range. The only real downfall of this is if you use Raptor of the Mist at the wrong time. It's not perfect. You can't just use it whenever an attack is coming. You have to understand combos. If you use it when something's going to combo you, then it'll just hit you out of the air afterwards. You have to use it on the last hit, otherwise dodge normal. This build, though, is just something that I enjoy profusely, and would say is probably the most simultaneously satisfying yet also functional way that I've played the game so far. And I would heartily recommend this to others to at least try some aspects of this, if not the whole thing. Mess around with Raptor of the Mist, even if not the whip part. Mess around with the whips, even without the Raptor part. And at this point, I should probably note a couple more things. I haven't said what to use for your offhand weapon, Ash of War, and honestly that's because I was having way too much fun with Raptor of the Mist to ever swap off of it. But if you want to make the best use of that slot, you should use one of 2 things. Either Beast's Roar, which is a ranged physical attack. It doesn't scale with the stats we are using, so the damage isn't great, but it's a high range option, and that's always nice to have within your toolkit. And the other option is Bloodhound Step. This skill is just silly. You've probably seen it everywhere before. The iframes are ridiculous. The movement is ridiculous. The cost is very small. Any build that can fit this should at least consider it. It's just that good. And then also the Flask of Wondrous Physic that we are using. There is nothing that directly boosts anything we're doing in particular, so instead I have gone for a couple of options that synergize well with what the build does a bit naturally. In the Opaline Hard tier, which increases all damage negation for the duration, at least so it says in in reality it affects everything but physical damage negation, but that's still great anyways, making us even tankier. And then the final thing that makes this tick, the Thorny Cracked Tear, which increases your damage with consecutive hits in a short period of time, which, as we are not only using whips, but also ignoring a good portion of the enemy's hits to instead land more attacks of our own, will be active a fair bit once this buff is applied. Before going over the location of it all then, what attributes do you want to have to make this build function exactly as it does in the video here? Well, 40 Vigor is the minimum that you want to run around with generally. Mind is fine at base for this, honestly, but keep in mind that every few successful Raptor of the Mist, you will have to drink a mana flask, not particularly often, but it does happen. For stamina, you do want to up it a little bit. The amount depends on your overall level, as this is the lowest priority stat of the ones that we upgrade, but more stamina means more jump attacks before you have to stop, so of course it all helps out your damage a bit. Strength you only need 10, and dexterity you only need 20 to wield the whips itself. 25 Faith to allow us to use our 3 buffing incantations, and then finally Arcane as our main scaling damage stat all the way up to 80 as soon as your other stats will allow it. Past this, more vigor is always great. As for where to get these items then, the first Hoslow Petal Whip is a reward for the Volcano Manor questline. Specifically, while completing the invasion quest in the Mountaintop of the Giants, you will get this after the fight. The second Hoslow Petal Whip comes as a reward at the end of the questline for Darian Hoslow, and also technically Alexander, and also technically Jarbjorn. If you want a proper guide on that questline though, check out our video on the updated quests of patch 1.03, which was when this drop was added to the game. To get the Ash of War Raptor of the Mist specifically, we'll have to do the first couple of steps of a questline. Specifically, outside of the Murkwater Cave in Limgrave, there will be an invasion that happens when you get there for the first time. After completing it, the person that showed up to help you will be just down the river. His name is Yura. Once you've talked to him here, he will move to the main Academy Gate Site of Grace in Liurnia. Talk to him here and help out in his quest, and at the end of this step, you will get this Ash of War as your reward. You also want to have some sort of seal. No, not that one, but anyone in Elden Ring will do. The scaling doesn't matter in the slightest, as buffs don't change with scaling, so you don't even have to upgrade this at all. Just hold it there and take advantage of its bountiful rewards. The White Mask helmet along with the rest of the armor set is in the Mogwin Palace area, in the Lake of Blood visible from Palace Approach Ledge Road Site of Grace. Once you get to the back side of the lake after dealing with a couple of other invasions, the final invasion will drop this armor set for you, and unfortunately this can't be done after the boss of the region is dead, however. The Raptor's Black Feathers armor chest comes in the Sage's Cave in the Altus Plateau. Continue along until you reach a waterfall, and then on your left will be an illusion wall, behind which is 2 chests. Open them and you'll get this chest. From that chest. Oh wait, it was that chest. The Bloodlord's Exaltation Talisman comes from the boss at the end of the Lanedell Catacombs dungeon, which is in the sewers under the city. From the underground roadside side of Grace, head out to the left and down this ladder, carefully then jumping down and watching out for the heavy metal lobsters. Man, they've evolved over the last 50 years since that song. Take a right after heading into this hole in the wall to find the start of the dungeon itself. The Claw Talisman is in Stormvale Castle. From the Rampart Tower side of Grace, jump down onto the rooftop of Travel, as I have lovingly dubbed it, climb up this pillar and then follow the wall around until you see this ladder. At the top of the ladder, you'll find the talisman sitting on a corpse. The Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman is in the Hallig Tree dungeon. From the Drainage Channel site of Grace, head down and out onto the branch, then onto the pillar beside it. Hop over to the next pillar up and then go up this pillar to another branch to wind up on the roof of the building. Jump in the hole in the roof to land on a wooden beam, and then the chest containing the talisman is on your left on the balcony behind the prawns. And then the Erdtree's Favor +2 talisman comes from Lanedell, the capital city, after it has become the capital of Ash. Return back to the city, but come from the elevator of the mountaintop of the giant side. Once you reach the bottom of the giant staircase, head through this open area and a bunch of nasty giant enemies will spawn that you can totally ignore as you head to the piece of debris in the back with your reward atop it. The Golden Vow incantation comes from the Corpse Stench Shack on the east side of Mount Gelmir, and Flame Grant Me Strength is between a couple of angry and versed fire hydrants behind Fort Gale on the west side of Caelid. And then finally for incantations, Dragonbolt Blessing is located in the Stormcaller Church up in the hills on the southern Altus Plateau. For your Wondrous Flask mixtures, the Opaline Hardtear is found by killing the boss at the Minor Erdtree in the northeast of Caelid, and then the Thorny Cracked Tear comes from the boss of the Minor Erdtree in the northeast of the Consecrated Snowfields region. And that is absolutely everything covered. All you could want to know about how to really make this build sparkle and shine, people. Look, I really love this build. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy every single build I put out quite a bit, or else I wouldn't recommend that people play it. But this one is just a totally different kind of satisfaction than the others. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll try to put some of this into use in your own way. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.